it's one part greater cultural clarity and also one part greater insecurity. So I'm going to get into this. This is hard to break down, actually. In the United States, there is very little conception of a trans person at all. We know about the idea of cross-dressers. The most common form is drag queens, right? Like drag queens, most people have heard of a drag queen. Most people have an idea of what a drag queen looks like, right? Japan has a very similar concept of okama. Literally just means gay, pretty much. But typically, an okama historically was basically a trans woman. Eventually, they came up with the phrase "gay boy" in the 60s, to distinguish okama who were typically working in a club, like cabaret or something like that. Just people who just in their everyday lives are, born as a man, living as a woman. Gay boy, the term they came up with. I learned about all this from the movie Funeral Parade of Roses, which is basically a documentary/movie about the gay boy movement made at the time. So Japan, I just think, has a little bit more historical and cultural consciousness of transgenderism, and also a way smaller land area where like everybody kind of sees each other. Like basically any type of a person that there is a high visibility of. And granted, Japan as a country generally highly discourages you to be a unique type of a person. They're usually trying to get everybody to fit into a square box. But that's kind of helpful in some ways, depending on your experience as a trans person, because they very much see it as like, if you're not performing male, you need to identify as a woman. Like you need to identify with your performance. In America, people will see me, who is obviously performing feminine in my dress, and they'll see the like masculine attributes and they'll think, oh, well, that's a man in a dress. Because they think that the core of who you are comes before the way society sees you. In Japan, they believe the opposite. The core of who you are is meant to sit behind a mask you wear for society. You are meant to try to be normal. And in America, it's like you're meant to just be born normal or you're a freak. Those are your options, Like in Japan, it's like well, we want you to be normal. So we're going to, if you're very feminine and you're always, you act like a woman, we don't want you to be in the fucking boys' room. That's just not what it doesn't make sense culturally for them. So I think that's given them simultaneously more acceptance of cross-dressing and trans people, but also they don't feel the need to say this makes you a woman the way we do. I think like, well, they'll say like, okay, you're performing culturally as that, but not that it's because the American identity is so personal, where it's like everybody has to see me the way I see me. So it becomes like, well, I have to say I'm a woman and everybody has to say I'm a woman, as opposed to just not being worried about anything other than the social character. Like to a Japanese person, I just don't think that they expect to see the real you when they look at you. That you're not supposed to, unless it's like your partner or something. Like in America, there's just expectation that you're just always being yourself all the time, and if you're not, then it's seen as like a liar, or you're like deceiving in some way. But so that makes it, for someone like me, where it's like there's an obvious contradiction, and like, okay, I'm dressed like a woman, I've got facial hair, what's going on, And so that's where the confusion comes in, because again, Americans won't just say, oh, I guess that's a trans woman, like they don't categorically pick that. And so I just think there's less of a taste for it in America. There's people more so other transness, whereas in Japan it's more of a curiosity. It's more like, oh, I guess sometimes a boy is a girl, and some of us are really into that, I don't know. My perception on this has changed over the years about anime, where in the early days I thought the point of traps, or as we called them back then, because it is usually a character who looks like a girl and then is revealed to be a boy, and a lot of the times they saw themselves as boys. Like there's two different categories. There's like proper trans women like Peppo from Gankutsuo, who like identifies as a woman, and then there are like the otokonoko stereotype, you know, boy who just kind of looks like a girl and acts like a girl but identifies as a boy. And initially I thought it was more for fetishists and for people who, you know, want to fuck those characters. But I was obsessed with those characters, never on that level. Like, I always loved those kinds of characters and I wanted to know more about them, and I was always very disappointed that the stories usually didn't explore their issues more, you know, like what is going on with that character. I wanted to know. And so now, you know, on reflection, I see it more for people like me. I just think there's a lot of people who come to anime because of gender questions, you know, like whatever it is you're trying to look for reification of your identity in with anime, like a big part of that can be feeling unbelonging or otherness within your gender. And so anime generally tries to represent, like if you're building a cast, let's say, of high school students, like your anime characters are supposed to be the most interesting people in that class, right? Like typically it's going to be whoever's got superpowers, whoever's got an alien technology, you know, and whoever's transgender. It's just like whatever thing you as an outsider are connecting to, that's the part you're looking for in the anime, you know? So I just think that anime, it has a tendency more so to center itself on a generic protagonist who is supposed to be just everyman. You know, anybody could project onto this character, but that character doesn't matter. It's about the environment they're in. It's about being in a place full of interesting people. And so the average viewer could project onto the main character because, you know, he's generic. Anybody could project onto him. That's not really the point. The point is that you project onto someone in his environment and you are a part of that clique, you know, unless you yourself do feel that you are just a generic person. But I don't know how many people really believe that who watch anime. I think usually waifuism is less of a I like want to marry this character and more like I am this character, you know, like this character is how I really see myself. And maybe you don't feel like it's a trans thing, you know, but I definitely think there's a lot of people who feel like, you know, the inner voice inside of me is like Guargura, you know, and like that's why they like that character, you know. It's like, this would be me if I was an anime, you know. But and that one's actually a real person, but I figured that would be more relatable. Like, it's somebody I can imagine people watching and going, oh yeah, I'm just like this, or I want to be just like this, and so like that character, you know. Well, that was a long rant. So far